Hello everyone, I'm Dead Knight and this is In It to Win It. Today we are going to be talking about the best decks in Hearthstone in Standard Season 89, the first season with the United and Stormwind set out. And we're going to look at the best decks based on a few different metrics here. I think it will be demonstrative to talk about what decks the pros are playing, what decks the statisticians are saying have the highest win rates, and then what decks people are complaining about being the best decks. So first, I want to talk about Grandmasters Tournament, which is being played right now. So looking at round one in the Americas, we can learn a lot about what the pros think the best decks are. And so when we look at the spread of the 64 different decks that were brought by the 16 competitors, there's one major theme, two major themes actually, that are emerging from this. Firstly is that the pros seem to think that Questline Warlock is the best deck in the game right now. So we had 14 of the 16 players all brought a deck that had the Demon Seed in it. So it's no surprise why people think this is the best. It is really easy to complete this quest. People's health totals are dropping down, climbing up. They get to keep cards in their hand, and then once that quest gets complete, usually the turn that Tamsin comes down is usually game over. So it's fairly consistent because you're drawing cards. It's fast, and once the game plan gets executed, usually there's nothing your opponent can do about it. Interestingly, stat-wise, on hsreplay.net, which is going to be our main source for when we're talking about stats, this deck has a below 50% win rate across the board, which means that this deck is probably on the harder end to play because all the pros are winning with it, but everyone else is losing with it. But that doesn't change the fact that it is perceived by the pros to be the best deck based on representation. Now I'll go with the second one by far in Grandmasters as far as representation goes, which is Lifesteal, One Turn Kill Demon Hunter. So there were 13 Demon Hunter decks brought to Grandmasters in the Americas side, so just one shy of Questline Warlock. And most of these lists are almost identical. What they're running the Demon Hunter quest line, which I mentioned this in my video talking about Demon Hunter, but I definitely underestimated how important that mana reduction was to getting that one turn kill combo off. So the pros did not. They all immediately saw the potential of this. They cut Skull of Gul'dan, they dropped their curve really low, and they just went for the one turn kills. So this deck got huge representation. Nobody brought Death Rattle Demon Hunter. Everyone's bringing one turn kill Demon Hunter, and it's really effective. Mostly because with all that card draw, it's much faster and easier to draw the combo than it was before, and with even just that little bit of mana reduction, you don't even have to complete the quest line. Just a little bit of mana reduction can get you that combo off pretty early, and obviously there's nothing your opponent can do about it in almost all cases. So very popular. Again, looking at the stats on hsreplay.net, below 50% win rate. So the two most popular decks in Grandmasters are both below 50% on HS Replay, and based just on win rate stats are considered, tier 3, tier 4, at the same level as meme decks as far as, success rate in as far as the stats go. But the pros are maximizing these decks. So you can tell these are, they're not super straightforward to play. They're difficult to survive and connect your win condition. And in both decks, you find yourself vulnerable for a lot of the game. Questline Warlock, you're dropping your own health total. You're vulnerable to some burst damage. The Demon Hunter one turn kill deck, you have almost no board presence for most of the game. It's difficult to balance board clearing and card drawing to stay alive to get the combo. So you can see why pros can maximize their chances of winning with this, and it might be hard for the average person. But those are the best two decks as far as the pros go. Now, as far as stats go, and as far as the decks that I find really fun to play and high quality decks, So the highest performing deck stat-wise on HS Replay is Hand Buff Paladin. So this had, I'd say, middling representation. I think 6 or 7 people brought Hand Buff Paladin to Grandmasters, and I hit Legend with this deck, and I think it is really strong. Obviously it can lose to those burst one-turn kill decks, but I wouldn't say that anything's a bad matchup. It can close out games on surprise turns. It's also pretty consistent. It's really difficult to clear the board against, and it can come back from behind. So I really liked this deck, hit Legend with it, and stat-wise, it's the top performing deck. So, and it got some representation in Grandmasters. I think it's an excellent deck. So, I would still take a look at playing this deck, even though the pros are running combo decks. The next one we're going to go to is what was the top performing deck for a very long time and is still number 2 stat-wise on HS Replay, which is just Face Hunter. So you look at the Face Hunter deck list that people are running and compare it to what they were running before Stormwind, and you pretty much only have one new card, which is Aimed Shot, the card that I said was the best card in the set for Hunter. It is just as good as I thought it would be. It makes Barack Code Obama so much better, and it's just so much consistent damage, and the deck is just high quality. Again, middling representation in Grandmasters, just like Hand Buff Paladin. I think 6 people might have brought it, and stat wise it's great. If you look at Blizzard stats, they're saying that Face Hunter is still the top performing deck across the higher diamond ranks. So it's just incredibly consistent. The damage is just so fast paced, and if people are trying to run Demon Seed where they're going to be hurting themselves, if they don't run that precisely right, they're losing to Face Hunter because the damage is just so fast and in your face. So you're looking at this interplay between these 2 really fast aggressive decks and then these 2 difficult to play combo decks, and you're seeing the pros seem to be able to manage that really well in those control and one-turn kill decks, but everybody else is finding success with the fast aggressive decks. And then finally we're going to talk about the 5th deck, which I would say is perception based. So perception based is the Questline Mage. Questline Mage is one of the more frustrating decks to play against because it feels like everything is going right for the mage all the time. So they play the quest line, they can complete each phase of the quest line in 1 turn sometimes. So turn 4 they've completed the entire quest line, in turn 5 they've played Dawn Grasp. So it feels really frustrating to play against. And then once Dawn Grasp is out, they reduce the mana cost of their cards, they draw their whole deck and burn your face, and it just feels bad. And feels bad tends to generate the most complaints. And I think Questline Mage is probably one of the main things that contributed to Solitaire. Even though one-turn kill Demon Hunter and one-turn kill Warlock are the ones the pros are playing, and they're really good, you can beat those decks. Questline Mage, it just feels really hard to play against, and contributed to people just cutting minions from their deck entirely because it was stopping Mage from completing their quest line. But when you look at the stats and what the pros are playing, Questline Mage just isn't there. Questline Mage is right around 50% win rate on HS Replay. I've experimented with a couple different builds, and depending on your matchup, sometimes you just can't get those questline cards out, and sometimes if you just don't draw your card drawing and you can't just keep feeding your hand, then you can feel powerless. So it doesn't always win. It's not quite as consistent as you might think, even though there's plenty of card draw in there, and it definitely has weaknesses. So Questline Mage, even though it's generating the most complaints and people feel like it's the best deck, people feel like it's the hardest to play against, the stats don't seem to bear that out, and then the pros don't seem to think so either. I think only 3 or 4 different people brought Mage to Grandmasters on the America side. So when we look at those 5 decks, we're seeing basically a skill gradient where the pros are able to manage those control decks, and the decks that hurt themselves or don't put any board presence, even if you're uh, pro or not, the Face Hunter and Hand Buff Pally are still going to be pushing damage. They can always win just about any game just because of how much damage they can put out, what kind of board presence they have, uh, the surprise damage that they can bring. So they can win any game piloted by any player, and the stats are showing that makes them the top decks as far as win rate across the board goes. And then the deck that people hate playing against the most, Mage, is just right around 50-50, and not too impressive for the pros. So those are the top 5 decks that as far as from a couple different metrics. My personal favorite has been Hand Buff Pally so far, but I'm starting to play a little more Demon Hunter, and I'm really seeing the potential. I really need to recant my Questline pick. It's way better than I thought, but a pretty wide range of classes are getting some success. The only one that is getting dunked on is Warrior right now. Warrior hasn't really broken through, but we'll talk about that in another video. What has your experience been? What do you think the best deck is? What do you think is the best metric to determine the best deck? Leave some respectful comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tune in next time.